Hello and welcome to this World Anvil video where we are looking at the template of formation. Now, formation, that obviously talks to the military formation prototypes. How do your legions, phalanxes, swordsmen, pikemen, knights, stormtroopers, what do they look like? How do they form themselves? What is their equipment and what is their tactics? Now, on the surface, you might be sitting there going, well, it's an army. They arm me. They wander around and they beat stuff up. They're just giant armies. We don't really need to worry too much about them. Well, you'd be surprised. An army brings with it a phenomenal amount of information which you can use to enhance not only your narrative but also your world as things develop and grow out of formations and out of the things that go along with them. So when we look at formations, the first thing that comes across, of course, we've got our freeform vignette where you can talk about exactly descriptors and that kind of thing. You then can go into the type. So are they Air Force, Airborne, Armory, all those kinds of wonderful things. And of course, you then go into the parent formation. You've got related ranks, manpower, equipment, weaponry. What do they use? What are their vehicles like? What's their command structure like? And of course, the command structure, you can really break it down to the minutiae of what is a sergeant called? What is a lieutenant called? What is a lieutenant called? Is there a difference in the way they pronounce their names? All those kinds of wonderful things. And then what is the training like? Is the training grueling or not? Now, even if you are designing a campaign that is not focused on the military, by having one or two of the bigger empires that have got a strong military presence mapped out like this, you can throw in tidbits of information that just make your world feel living. And that's the goal, is to try and make the space feel as if it is a real entity. Now, I want to talk to you about the Roman army. Now, the Roman army was an army that, well, it last fought its last major battles about 2,000 years ago. Okay, about 1,400 years ago. Well, 600 years. It was a long time ago since a Roman legionary stepped foot onto a battlefield. And yet, the sheer amount of information that we know and love about that particular army formation is phenomenal. Now, something that I also want to talk about is the idea of the Roman legion. Now, Roman legion was comprised, up until the 1st century, of 10 cohorts, or roughly 5,000 men. Each cohort was controlled by a centurion, and the centurion would have an individual by the name of the optio, or your optio, who was your best man, chosen man, if you like, who would make sure that the rank and file did what they needed to do. Now, the centurion's armor was rather curious. Unlike his men, he would wear his Roman helmet, but instead of the plume going across the length of his skull, it sat sideways so that his men would always be able to see where he was in battle. It's an interesting detail and something that you could have thrown into your game if you had sort of something and used this particular template. Now, that sideways crest obviously would make them a specific target for the enemy to focus their fire on. So the centurion would often wear quite good chainmail armor and then have all of the medals of the campaigns that they worked on to protect themselves and to show off their prowess. Now, there is a centurion, I've completely forgotten his name, but it has been such a long time. There is a Roman centurion who was based in the UK during, obviously, the Roman occupation of the Isles, who served for 50 years as a centurion. Well, not as a centurion, obviously he worked his way up through the ranks, but he was a centurion and had a service record of over 50 years. That's quite remarkable considering what was going on and what was being done there. So there's some interesting stuff that's come out just by looking at the armor, by looking at the rank, by looking at the name. Obviously, a legate was in charge of a legion. I'm not going to go any further than that because you can see how excited I am. Now, the next tab in this template that makes me so excited is the logistics tab. Now, the logistics tab is something that a good friend of mine, who was actually responsible for bringing me over to Japan, has mentioned frequently to me, and it got me thinking. And so when I saw this tab, I thought, yes, this is exactly what we needed. Logistics. How do you support your army? So I did some basic maths, so this is not historically accurate. This is me doing rather funny little mathematics. with a legion of men, 5,000 men. On average, according to, let's say, the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing system, a single individual requires 2 pounds of food a day. That's a standard iron ration. It weighs 2 pounds. You can survive on half rations for a while, but you're going to get grumpy. So each man requires 2 pounds of rations. That's 10,000 pounds of food per day per legion. All right, an average wagon, and this is historically accurate, the covered wagons that crossed the great Midwestern plains of the USA during the Great Settler Rush, that wagon was certified to carry 2,000 pounds. So you need, then, on average, 5 wagons a day to cover the weight of food that your army needs for a single day. 5 wagons each require 6 oxen. So you've got 30 oxen, 5 wagons, 5 drivers, 5 cooks perhaps, that have to be used every single day to keep your army of 5,000 going. So the logistics starts to open up such an amazing amount of adventure opportunities, of engagement opportunities. Imagine if you come across this, it's not going to be a little ring of wagons. It's going to be an entire field that has been taken over by wagons. There's oxen all over the place. There's cooks busy trying to turn these iron rations into something that remotely resembles gruel, and that is difficult. You've got this entire field full of people. The battle is over there, half a day's march away. But the wagons had to stop soon enough to be able to create breakfast, to be able to create some kind of midday meal, and then hopefully something nice and warm for the lads and lasses when they come back from having defeated the enemy triumphantly. There's an entire space that's alive and going on just because of the logistics behind supporting a mere 5,000 men. So 100,000 men is just a terrifying prospect of moving a whole city's worth of people to look after those men. And you can put that all in here. There's upkeep. How do they recruit people? What do they do in terms of their auxilia, which is a term that comes from the Roman Empire. Each of these each of these legions had 120 equites, or eques, legionaries, however you want to pronounce it. Anyway, they had 120 cavalry with them. Interesting thing about the Roman cavalry, they didn't have stirrups. That was only brought to Europe by Genghis Khan much later. So they had to ride on these horses and hold on with their knees. Hence the cavalry not playing a huge part, well, not a particularly huge part in the Roman army. But enough of that. I'm getting too excited. Again, history, founding date, when did they start? The history of units is so important. What standards do they have? What is the reason why people join that particular legion or that particular group within your starfighting force? What is their history? How many Death Stars have they blown up? Just think of the Star Wars environment where you've got red 1 and gold 1 and gold 3 and green 3 and red leader and blue leader and green leader. Those have all got a tremendous amount of weight behind them, and yet they don't really feature very much in the actual films themselves. And they've got an entire series of books that have come out, of course. But the idea is, don't dismiss formations as simply a tab for people who are writing war stories. This is a tab that opens up, this is a template that opens up a whole lot of tabs that really will make your world feel as if it has been in existence for a long time. Anyway, enough rambling and exciting chatter about the Roman legions and all those kinds of wonderful things. You need to go and light up the forge.